Welcome to Philanthropy Impact's Walk in My Shoes series for members. The events unfolding in Ukraine are at the forefront of many people's minds right now, with the UNHCR estimating that over 1.5 million have crossed into neighbouring countries in the space of 10 days. A devastating blow to the efforts already in place to tackle the global displacement crisis that we are facing across the world. Philanthropy Impact exists to be a resource for those who want to tackle some of the world's pressing issues. So today we are hosting a special session to answer the question, how can advisors support their clients in actioning support in response to the Ukraine crisis? My name is Zofia Sahanik and I'm the Director of Membership and Development here at Philanthropy Impact and the person to talk to if you'd like to know more about our training and how to make the most of your membership with us. You can reach me in the chat or I'll share my email at the end if you're watching on YouTube. As always, we will try to keep this discussion to strictly 30 minutes, although I have a feeling it will be hard. We do encourage you to use the chat to introduce yourselves and have your say, and please pose questions to our panel. Our chair for this discussion is Philanthropy Impact's Board Chair, Rennie Hoare, who's partner and head of philanthropy at Hoare & Co. And joining Rennie, we welcome Enver Solomon, who's the CEO of the Refugee Council, Anna-Louisa Psarras, sorry if I'm getting this wrong, guys, from the donor advised fund Prospero World, and Konstantin Sivokhin, who's also a trustee of Prospero World, and a very last minute addition who was able to join us with just 2 hours notice, Laura Kyrke-Smith, who's the UK Executive Director of the IRC, who are also a member of the Disaster Emergency Committee. Thank you all so much for joining us today, and I will now pass over to John to make a start. Thank you, John.
You mean Renee?
Sorry, Rennie. Sorry, last 2 weeks have been John. Sorry, Rennie.
Yeah, well, I mean, good to mix things up then. And thanks very much to what's an absolutely fantastic panel, and helping people draw together information and be able to move quickly is absolutely essential. In terms of trying to get down into the heart of things, Laura, I think if I could come to you first and just firstly to understand what it's like being part of the Disasters Emergency Committee, and then what you're seeing on the ground in the response so far would be massively helpful.
Thanks very much. So the International Rescue Committee is one of 15 member agencies of the Disasters Emergency Committee, and as you will have seen, we launched an appeal last Thursday. The response has been absolutely incredible. We have already, as you may have seen this morning, we've already hit 100 million in donations to the Disasters Emergency Committee. So it has been fantastic, but of course the needs are vast and growing all the time, and I think we're set for a really long and complex crisis here in terms of the response of DEC members. So the fundraising won't stop there. You don't need me to tell you how awful the situation is. We can all see it on our TV screens. The IRC has a presence in Poland already. We're just expanding our presence inside Ukraine. We've seen 1 million people flee across that border into Poland already. The vast majority are women and children. Of course, husbands and brothers, men are having to stay inside Ukraine. They're being turned away at the border. Their needs are incredibly great as they cross the border. The average wait time to get across that border is 3 days now, and there's very little emergency relief available as they're queuing to get across. So they'll have a suitcase at best, sometimes nothing. The temperatures are freezing, sub-zero at the moment, so they would have been waiting in the snow. So in terms of the needs and the response that the DEC members are prioritising, the number one priority is just emergency support in terms of food, water, shelter, medical needs. But there's a lot more to it than that as well. So of course, providing items is one thing that we can do, sort of material goods, but actually providing emergency cash to families fleeing is really important as well. The shops in Poland and in other neighbouring countries are stocked with goods that they need still. It's just that they've fled without cash on them or without being able to withdraw cash on their journey. So that's a really important priority for the member agencies. And beyond that, there is lots more that we are starting to do, including ensuring that the refugees have access to information about their rights as they cross the border, but also the services available to them. And I think that list of needs is just going to continue growing, and the people crossing the border will be crossing in a more and more desperate position. And of course, those inside Ukraine will find their situations increasingly desperate too.
So it's a multifaceted response, but really when we're talking about crisis and emergency, that's the situation which is being seen on the ground at the moment. Enver, if I could come to you, please, and first just to understand how you've got into this role and a bit of your journey, and then also understanding how the Refugee Council operates and the part it can play.
Yeah, thanks. So I took over as Chief Executive of the Refugee Council nearly 18 months ago, and actually it's quite a personal journey for me. My mother came to the UK in the 60s fleeing political persecution in apartheid South Africa, and my father's family were Jewish refugees into the UK many decades ago now. So for me, as someone that has refugees in my body, so to speak, it's a very much a personal journey to be doing this role now. And at the Refugee Council, we work with up to 15,000 people that come to the UK each year as refugees, supporting them to integrate into the UK, to access all the things that they need to rebuild their lives. And for those that are going through the process of being allowed to stay in the UK, we help them on that journey, meeting their needs. A big demand is therapeutic help and support. And actually, what we're doing at the moment is we're mobilizing to be ready to support Ukrainians when they arrive in the UK. There's a bit of a political storm taking place as we speak about the government's pretty lame, mean-spirited response to date, unlike other EU countries. But we know Ukrainians will be coming here. And they will need advice and help about how to access benefits, how to get their kids into school. They'll have immediate needs about therapeutic support because they'll have gone through a great deal of trauma, and they'll need general orientation. And we are mobilizing to be able to work with the Ukrainians to provide that support for them, because we know that first period of arrival and settling and then beginning to integrate is so critical.
I think that bit of scaling up and making sure that you've got the institutional readiness to accept of what is a very predictable wave that will be coming in, and how do you help people on that assimilation, but also I think the huge trauma that needs to be counselled is critical. I think that bit of preparation, other tools that can be brought to bear. Konstantin, I know that obviously so far we've talked about philanthropy and the tools that can be used. You have a slightly different angle of thinking about things from impact investment, ESG. Are there things that we can be doing there and beginning to think about?
Yeah, so just kind of a little intro. I became part of the board of trustees of Prospero World just very recently, just less than a month. And kind of my rationale behind this was to, as our organization is moving more towards ESG compliance, and particularly focusing on the S part, which is social. At the time when most companies are thinking about environmental and governance. So I wanted to see how I could learn about various tools about creation of tangible political social impact, and then implementing that knowledge into developing effective tools for the ESG strategy. So this is about finding out what really works. It's not about just a box ticking exercise. Oh, now ESG compliant. And I know that many organizations in the UK have their own foundations, and they're using funding from those foundations to support humanitarian aid. This is how they're trying to, I suppose, to cover the kind of the S part, the social, so being supporting the communities. So that's really kind of one of the main angles.
Really helpful. And Anna-Louisa, if I can come to you in terms of thinking about that use of different toolkits, there's a huge amount of possible options out there, due diligence, people absolutely wanting to help. What are the ways that people are beginning to just work through that information and begin to make decisions?
It's been amazing, the response, as other panelists have said, and since the started, it's incredible. Everybody wants to help and everybody wants to do something. So what we've done, we've spent the last 10 days mapping what's going on, what the needs are, who's doing what, and trying to put the pieces together. And of course, in a situation like this, it's incredibly fast-paced, incredibly changing. There's infrastructural issues within Ukraine. It's a highly complex, rapid changing situation. So we are focusing on looking at both outside Ukraine, and we're working with some people on the borders of Poland, particularly with refugees arriving, but also within country, we're looking at identifying specifically what is needed and what can be done with all the usual checks in place. But obviously it needs to be done urgently. So we've looked at about 30 organizations. We've had large problems trying to get hold of our own partners. The Klitschko Foundation are one of our, we have a fiscal sponsorship program, they're one of our partners. We haven't been able to contact them for 8 days, which is a huge worry. But there are a huge number of civil society groups who are working under the umbrella of established organizations. So we've been targeting those organizations, finding out what's going on where and what's needed. And we've been looking at groups in Europe, in the States. We spoke to people in Germany last week, the Netherlands, like all over the place. So we're trying to do some due diligence and assess what's needed when, so that we can help people to really focus their giving and give it in a targeted way, both within Ukraine and outside. But it changes every day, every minute, as everybody is aware from hearing the news.
And those organisations that you're seeking to do things with, are they registered charities, civil society organisations? So none of the above. What type of form are you searching out?
It's a combination of both. So my background's in crisis response. I've worked in Zimbabwe, in Myanmar, in Syria, and various different places. And what I've sort of found across the board, this is a very unique situation, but what I found across the board is that the role of civil society in a situation of panic and crisis is incredibly powerful. But obviously you have to work through, regulated channels. You have to ensure that a donor's funding is being used in the right way. So we're looking at local organizations and their international partners and seeing where we can add value. So one of the things that we do is, as I said, this fiscal sponsorship program, which means that we can accept donations from UK taxpayers in a tax efficient way. And we've been looking at how to channel that funding, having maximised it by accepting it here, being able to claim the gift aid, do all the checks and balances, and then go through vetted organisations who are working with civil society within Ukraine and on the borders, caring for the needs of refugees who, need, as Laura said, a list of quite basic but also quite complex things that need to be done sort of now. So we're trying to activate the sort of civil society groups that we have, but under the umbrella of registered charities, whether they're American 501c3s or whether they're European entities or within Ukraine itself, registered charities, including our partners who haven't been able to contact, but we'll continue to attempt to contact them.
And that trade-off between speed and safety is a really difficult one as there's an emerging crisis. And look, Laura, when talking about the developments on the ground, I think that it sounds like a partnership approach, people who are specialised and doing their specific roles. Can you explain a little bit more about how certainly even the 15 organisations which you're the tapestry with, how that works in practice, and how do you make that as strong a body as possible?
Thanks. And yeah, and I mean, Anna-Louisa was exactly right in terms of the importance of local partners. And for us as DEC members, it's the local partners that are also the first responders. There are some fantastic NGOs already operational inside Ukraine and in neighbouring countries. Local government is also really important for us as a partner. Of course, they're the first one to provide services both inside Ukraine and neighbouring countries. So we've been going through similar processes to what Anna-Louisa was describing in terms of firming up agreements with local partners. They're very capable, but of course they are small scale, and a week ago could not have anticipated having to respond on anything like the scale that they are already having to respond on, let alone what's coming down the track, I think, in terms of growing needs. So and the advantage then of having a setup like the Disasters Emergency Committee is that we as 15 large NGOs based in the UK can coordinate in terms of which partners we're approaching and firming up agreements with, so that we're not overwhelming those local partners with 15 approaches at one time. We will do the coordination bit first between us, but I think it's also just very beyond partners. What the DEC enables us to do is to coordinate both our assessment of the needs, but then also the response to those needs in terms of who does what. And OCHA, the Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, part of the UN, will sort of take the lead on the coordination piece with all the different NGOs, but within that we will work out between us who leads on health, who leads on food, who leads on cash distribution, and ensure that it's as effective a response as it can be in a very, very challenging and fluid situation.
Really, I mean, fascinating to hear how it all fits together. And Konstantin, there's a question that's come up in the chat. I don't know whether, as trustee, as a custodian of things, you'd feel comfortable answering it. It's saying, what are the challenges in terms of accepting donations from Russian donors, and are there things that need to be considered there? If that isn't one you're comfortable with, we can definitely pass over.
Probably Anna-Louisa would be better placed answering this question.
Sure. So we have quite strict checks that we have to do about source of funds and who we're receiving funds from, and that it takes a variety of different ways, but we do have to check where it's coming from, and that's something that our bank requires, something that our constitution requires. So it is something that we would look at, but of course we wouldn't reject funding from a Russian who wanted to do good. But we'd obviously need to check anybody, whether they were Russian or non-Russian, to see what their source of funds were, and if there was any kind of conflict, we would send that back. And there have been cases in the past where we sent things back, not in this scenario, but yeah, historically we desend funds back and don't receive them if we think there's anything that rings alarm bells.
I'll just give a personal example. I have some Russian friends that donated, and they all wanted to do this anonymously, because they're saying there is a law that if you support the enemy, this is treason, and that's why they're hiding the names, they're giving money, but they don't want anybody to know.
And through that, then, is that a benefit of the donor advised fund, giving one layer of sort of opacity and allowing people to help without feeling that as though the government can then step in?
Exactly. Yes.
So our donor advised fund, one of the benefits is that people can give completely anonymously, and technically a donation then comes from Prospero itself, so it gives that barrier of protection, but also allows for flexibility, so people can do things that they might feel endangered of. And as Konstantin said, we've received so many anonymous donations. It's something that we're very mindful of. Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense. And Enver, in this, we've been talking about due diligence and partners. It feels you're in scale mode, but are you looking at people who are operating in Poland on the border and beginning to look at those bridges of how people can get inside your stable of expertise and assistance?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, what we're starting to look at is look at the network of Ukrainian and Eastern European community organisations across the UK, actually, who are going to be so pivotal and so important in welcoming Ukrainians and providing that that support around them when they start coming to the UK, which is already happening in other parts of Europe. I mean, obviously in Poland, where there's a large Ukrainian community already, you know, that's underway, but there is a significant Ukrainian community here in the UK. And, you know, we're looking to build networks with those organizations. Many of them will be quite fragile, quite small. They won't have much capacity or capability. And we want to be able to develop a program where we can quickly ensure that they build up their capacity and capability. We've done something very similar in the UK with Afghan organizations to enable them to support the wave of Afghans that have come to the UK in recent months, and we want to do the same with Ukrainian community organisations here as well, because they're going to be, as I say, you know, play a really important role. Because when Ukrainians arrive, they will plug into their community networks that people will tell them about, and that's the best route to get support to them.
Yes, I think understanding where people might land, and then trying to build out from those safe and trusted networks where probably not much feels that safe and trusted is going to be vital. And Laura, one of the things that certainly is fascinating is big charities, it feels, have the resources to be able to take money in and scale up very, very quickly. And that I think is a huge appeal for right now. Do you feel that then there will be a point where there are more targeted smaller partners that do very specific things that you'll have to bring in, or what does the next wave of activity look like?
Yeah, I think that's right. We can scale up quickly, but as we've touched on, we can't do that without the local partners. So we're sort of you know, we're trying to get the programs off the ground at the same time as we're writing the strategy for what those programs will look like ultimately. So you sort of find the areas where you know you can make a big difference quickly, and you do that through the coordination mechanisms that we've discussed. But at the same time, we're continually assessing needs and looking at where that will grow, and there may well be particular areas where we do need to sort of deepen our support as well as continue to broaden it. And I think this point actually on information provision might be one of those, particularly as refugees move beyond the neighbouring countries into other countries in Europe, into the UK, as Enver has said. We find that often when we talk to our clients, the refugees that we work with, what they want is not necessarily stuff, but information on how they can, you know, where they can get a train to wherever they want to get to, or who they, you know, if they need legal aid, who they can speak to, or where the nearest hospital is. And so, you know, that's just one example. Is that, you know, I think we'll be looking at building out a platform that we already have called Signpost, to ensure that there is somewhere where Ukrainians can go to get accurate, up-to-date information about how they can meet their own needs. Yeah.
Very useful. And thinking of then the assistance that people can play. Obviously, a lot of the philanthropy impact members are advisors to high net worth individuals, ultra high net worth individuals. What role can these advisors play in being able to get funds in the right place, assist their clients through it? Konstantin, I see you. No, if I could come to you first. It feels that there's a timely aspect of it, and how people can really assist.
Yeah. So the advisor's role is ultimately to make the donors and investors' lives easier. That's how I look at it. And professional advisors need to provide solutions to donors and investors that they don't have time or resources to develop themselves. This is not something they can find online. So to give you an example, using Ukraine, if a donor wants to make a donation towards the humanitarian aid in Ukraine, he or she can easily find an organization and make a donation and feel good about it. However, this donor might not know that now many charities are struggling to deliver humanitarian aid because of all sorts of logistical problems, and Anna-Louisa was mentioning earlier, some infrastructure issues, bottlenecks, and so on. So therefore, knowledgeable and creative advisor who would be able to do the research on the ground, and as Laura mentioned earlier, having contacts there on the ground and understanding what the real issues are is very important. So at Prospero, we mobilize our network on the ground. I personally speak with people in the Ukrainian government who are coordinating humanitarian aid almost daily now, including weekends. They haven't slept for 11 days since the war started. And I'm also in contact, for example, with the coordination center at the Embassy of Ukraine in Kiev. I call my personal contacts in Ukraine, different cities, to really understand what the current issues are, and what the situation is, because the situation changes dramatically every day, and the priorities change as well. So it's very important to understand what the issues, the problems are, bottlenecks, and so on, to be able to have a targeted response that really makes a difference.
And with that, then you see some amazing efforts that have happened in terms of people collecting rugs and medical supplies, and they're getting convoys of vans out there. When weighing up such a dynamic situation, is money always the best thing to give, or how do you play the provision of things that are very tangible into being an assistance, or does that maybe block other much more structured agencies from doing things? It just seems that sometimes being well-intentioned, it might be going into the wrong place.
I think, Rennie, you're absolutely right, but my view on this is it's a combination of a big structured approach, but it takes time, right? You need different committees to look at it and agree. It takes time, but people need help now. And therefore, in my view, there's got to be both structural, big approach, bigger issues, bigger help from large organizations, and at the same time, smaller targeted aid that targets kind of specific needs on the ground that can be delivered very quickly. You know, as Rennie said, using vans and lorries that are going now.
Yeah, I've had someone from my street go and load a whole load of stuff out. I mean, truly amazing to see what people are doing. John, I see you're come sweeping on for us to distill down our best ideas. So I will hand over to you.
Okay, thank you. That's absolutely fabulous. I think we can go for another hour or two, but Sophia said it's 30 minutes, so we have to do as we're told. Probably the first time I'm doing what I'm told. Anyway, the role of philanthropists is really key, and also professional advisors, as Konstantin has mentioned. This is really essential. Thank you, Enver, Konstantin, Anna, and Laura, for speaking and making this really interesting but enlightening, but also for what your organizations are doing to help in a really difficult situation. And so thank you. So I'm going to ask each one of you 30 seconds, final words of wisdom that everyone can take away. It's so interesting that not one person is left that joined us. So that's really quite unusual and fabulous. So let's start with Laura.
Thanks. This may sound odd on a webinar about Ukraine, but I think my my final message would be for a request for people to keep their eye on other crises too, and their concern for other crises too. Of course, we've seen Ukraine produces a lot of wheat. Places like Yemen and Afghanistan that are already in crisis are reliant on Ukraine for exports. So this isn't happening in isolation. There's a lot of need in the world, and we can't let Yemenis and Afghans be the victims of this crisis in Ukraine too.
Great, thank you very much. Enver.
Yeah, I'd absolutely endorse that point that Laura makes. I think it's really important. And the other thing I would say, and it's really just validating what someone's put in the chat, that it's important to have faith in organizations who have a track record and experience in this space. You know, we've been operating for 70 years. We supported Vietnamese boat people when they came decades ago, people fleeing the horrendous war in the former Yugoslavia in the Balkans. and have trust in organisations that have the internal expertise, capability, and capacity to respond.
Thank you, Anna.
Laura said what I was going to say. Actually, we were talking to somebody this morning in Kenya who was actually talking exactly about the grain situation, and we have partners in Eastern Yemen and Afghanistan, and it's something we've been talking about. Whilst of course we're prioritising this at the moment, it's a stamina game as well. So we hope very much that people will continue to support the efforts that are being done in Ukraine as well, and alongside the other situations which are, you know, really in need of support also. And this is not going away overnight. This is a long game. So stamina, I think, is the key.
Thank you, Konstantin.
As a Ukrainian, I just wanted to say thank you to everybody who has organized this event, and to everybody who is supporting Ukraine now during these difficult times. And all the help and support has been incredible. So I just want to say a big thank you.
This is personal to you as well, isn't it? Because that's where you're from.
My family is there.
Yeah. Oh, well, our hearts go out to you. Rennie, the last word.
I think with this, the sharing of information and finding those trusted partners, as Enver said, is critical. I know Philanthropy Impact have published a list that people can use, and just as people see high quality ways of getting involved, please share them. There's no use in bottling them up. I think as philanthropists, if we can act in a coordinated way and we can really make sure that best practice is shared as far and wide as possible, we'll be doing what needs to be done.
Great, thank you very much.